Hello friends, welcome back to the Elite class. Today our topic is about the comparative anatomical features of man and apes. Let's get started. Starting with the introduction of man and apes, the man and apes belong to the same order called Anthropoida. This is the order man and apes both belong to, but they differ in their families. That means man belong to a certain family and apes to some other family. Now moving forward towards the anatomical features, let's start with skull. So the cranial capacity of a man is 1450 cc and of the ape is around 100 to 500 cc's. So that depicts the cranial capacity of the two and differentiates the same. Then the facial skeleton. The facial skeleton in the man is less developed as compared to the cranial skeleton. That means the cranial skeleton of the man is much more developed than its facial skeleton. But in the apes, the cranial skeleton is less developed and the facial skeleton is more developed. Coming towards the orbits in a man are larger in size, and that is why the eyes are closer to each other. And the orbits in the man are smaller, that is why the eyes are placed apart. Now coming to the sagittal crust. In case of the sagittal crust, this is not very much developed. Now what is actually the sagittal crust? It is simply a ridge of bone which runs lengthwise along the midline on the top of the skull. If this is the top of the skull, there is a bridge or a ridge of bone which is running lengthwise. So this midline on the top of the skull is called the sagittal crust. And in the man, the sagittal crust is not much developed, but in the apes, it is very well developed. Coming towards the occipital ridge. Now, coming to the occipital ridge, it is the back of the head. So, in man, it is bulging, but in the ape, it is flat and receding. So, this means that it is bulging in the humans, but in the apes, it is not bulging, it is flat and it is receding as well. Coming towards the forehead in the man is very well developed, but in the apes it is poorly developed. In the foramen magnum, the foramen magnum in man is placed anteriorly and in the apes it is placed posteriorly. Now what is foramen magnum? It is simply a hole in the base of skull through which the spinal cord passes. For instance, this is the skull and this is the base, so there is a hole in it through which the spinal cord passes. So this hole represents the foramen magnum. I hope till this point it is clear. Let's move forward and see some diagrams so that we can differentiate. For instance, if you will see over here that this is the receding forehead of the ape. This is the skull of ape and this is the skull of ape and this is the skull of a man or human. So if we see, they have the smaller cranium but they have a large bulbous cranium. That means their cranial structure is very well developed as compared to the facial structure. But here, as you can see, the cranial structure is smaller and the facial structure is very much well developed. Fine. So now coming forward, we can also differentiate in the ridge. That means they have some brow ridges. Their sagittal crust is very well developed. So, but in this part, you can see the sagittal crust is less developed, and that is why we cannot have any prominent structure for the same. So another differentiation in between them was they have the short jaw and the flatter face, but as you can see, they have prognathism. That means they have a protruding face, not a flat jaw or face, and they have prominent canines, as you can see, but in them the canines are very, very small. Moving forward to the another diagram which will differentiate the two. First, coming to the skull of an ape, that means their forehead is less developed, or we can say no forehead. Their supraorbital ridge, we'll talk about it later. Then we have the sagittal crust, to which the jaw muscles are attached. The sagittal crust in apes are very well developed, as we already studied about it. But if we see it in the man, the forehead is well developed, but the sagittal crust is not well developed. So this is the difference between the skulls. Moving forward towards the nose. Now we are comparing the anatomy of nose. Now in the man, the nose is quite prominent and elongated. We all know, we all must have heard about, and we have seen a man with a prominent and a very elongated nose. But in the ape, the nose is quite depressed and it's broader. The zygomatic process in the man is moderately developed, and in the ape it is well developed. Now first we need to know what actually the zygomatic process is. If we have to explain what the zygomatic process is, it is simply a rough triangular eminence which is situated at the angle of separation of anterior, zygomatic and orbital surfaces of maxillae. Let's have a look on the diagram. So you can here see that this is the zygomatic arc. This is represented here. This is the zygoma and this is the maxillae. So on this is forming a short triangular shape, right? This is the short triangular shape, and this is representing the zygomatic process, which is simply giving a movement, or it is well developed in the humans, but in the apes and in the humans it is moderately developed. We cannot say that it is not developed at all. Yes, it is developed in the humans also, but moderately, and in the apes it is very well developed. So let's move back to our slide. We have the nasal bridge. So it is very easily we can differentiate the nasal bridge, as we know that the man, they have well developed nasal bridge, and the apes, they have faintly developed nasal bridge. We can compare it. Let's have a look on the skull over here. So this is the nose. As you can see, this is not that much distinct, but here the nasal bridge is quite prominent. So this can be seen very easily. Moving forward towards the jaw. The jaw in a man, it has been developed, and the brain has been developed at its expense. So this is written over here. But in the ape it is quite reverse. Jaw developed at the expense of the brain. The size of the jaw in the man is smaller, and that is why they have a very compact face, because the facial structure we already studied, that is the facial skeletal is not much developed, but the cranial one is quite developed. But in the apes, the size of the jaw is moderately large. As we see, their skull is like this, but their facial structure is somewhat like this. So we can say the jaw portion is quite large as compared to the man. The chin in a man is present, but in the apes it is absent, because they represent prognathism, and in that you will not be having that distinct chin. But in the man you will find a chin for sure. Now we come towards the teeth. So okay, fine. This is over here, that is the teeth in the man are smaller. We very well know about it, and in the ape they are quite larger. The dental arc in the man is parabolic, or we can say that is V-shaped. Okay, and in the apes the dental arc is U-shaped. Now first have a look at what we have a look on the. This is the diagram. Okay, so this is the parabolic or the V shape of the dental arc of a man. Okay, dental arc of a man, and this is the dental arc, that is the U shape of apes. Okay, so this is representing the canines, and also you can see the size of the teeth. this is the man with smaller teeth, and this is the ape with larger teeth. Okay, let's move forward. So the diastema is absent in man. That is, diastema is simply the space between the teeth. We see that in the apes the space between the teeth is present, but as it is quite visible, we can also feel it in our own mouth, that we are lacking in diastema. We do not have any sort of diastema, but in the apes it do exist. The mandible in a man are slender and quite light, but in the apes they have a large and a massive mandible. So let's talk about the molar tooth of man and an apes. So this is how blunt and lower cusp is. We have blunt molars, but in the apes they have quite pointed molars. Okay, they also have this bicusp. Then also in the apes, the premolars. This is the two cusp premolar, but in the apes they have a depth in over here. Okay. So this is the difference between the tooth of the two creatures. Now moving forward to the vertebral column, if we have to talk about the curve, so in the man we have 4 curves and 32 segments in the vertebral column, but in the ape the curve is lacking. That means simply their vertebral column is quite straight in appearance. So this is the skull of a man, and this is of the ape, and now we'll show this is the vertebral column of man and an ape. So you can see this is actually first curve, the second curve, the third, and also so this is the 4 curves, and the segments have been divided into 32 segments. But if you can see in the ape, they do not have any sort of curve in their vertebral column. Now let's get back to the saline. Now this is the lumbar curve. The lumbar curve in the man is quite pronounced, but in the ape it is not that much pronounced. As you can see, this is the lumbar curve. This is the lumbar curve. This is quite pronounced over here, but there is no such pronunciation or any sort of highlight as such which we can see in a man's vertebral column. Nothing like that has been seen or we can see in the ape. Fine. Let's move forward towards the limbs. Comparing the limbs of man and ape, as we can see, the arms in the man are shorter in length than the legs of the man. But in the apes, it is reverse. The length of the arms is longer than the length of the legs. Coming to the linea aspera. Linea aspera is simply a longitudinal ridge on the posterior surface of femur. If this is the femur and it has a posterior surface, there is a longitudinal ridge to which the muscles are attached that represents the linea aspera. And the linea aspera is present in the man only, but it is not present in the ape. It is absent in them. Angle between the thumb and index finger. So this is simply the angle between the thumb and index finger. For example, this is the feet of a man. Okay, this is the feet of a man. But if we have to talk about the angle between the thumb and index finger, so sorry, it's not talking about the foot, it's talking about the hand, index finger and this. So you'll see that the angle between them is actually greater. For example, we have a 90 degree, we can also make a 90-degree angle. But the angle in case of the apes is not that much, it is lesser. Coming to the heels, the man has a well-developed heel, but in the apes, the heels are not as much developed as man. Coming to the big toe, so we're talking about the feet. So the toe we have the non-opposable toe. For example, this is our feet. Okay, so this is our longer toe. So this is all the fingers are facing towards the same side, no angle in between. Okay, so this is simply they are aligned in the same line. But in case of the apes, they have the opposable. For example, if these are like this, So they have a bit of like this as a feet. So their thumb or the big toe, we can say, it is opposable. I hope this is clear. Let's have a look. So with this we will have a look on the diagram. So as you can see in this diagram that the legs are longer in man than its arms, but in the apes the arms are longer than the legs. Okay, so and the postures differ. The simple and a straight vertebral column, but in the man we can have that there are curves, 1, 2, 3 and fourth curve, and with the number of the segments, and lumbar is quite prominent and pronounced, the curve is quite pronounced. So this is all we can have over here. Coming to the supraorbital ridge, that is simply a bony ridge which is located above the eye sockets, and it's present in all the primates. But in man it is quite small, and in the ape it is prominent. That means the brow ridge is quite prominent, as we can have a look in the diagram above. This is the, let's have a look over here. So they have a heavy brow ridge. Their brow ridge is prominent, but if we see in the humans, so there is no brow ridge at all, or it is not that much developed, as we can see, as we have been studying till this point of time. So this is the comparative distance, or we can say the difference between the man and the ape, and I hope this is all clear to you. This is all we have in this lecture. I hope you have got this, and if you have liked this video, kindly give it a thumbs up, and if you have not subscribed to my channel yet, do subscribe to it. We'll meet you in the next lecture. Till then, have a good day.